Good morning, everyone. I'm recording this on Wednesday. I'm a little behind this week. Normally, I record a number of days early. So I don't know what happened yet with the April 2nd, which is the day this airs, Trump tariffs on whether or not he hit Canada with some pretty hard stuff. So I'm still in the dark, so that's why I'm not going to be super commenting on that. Just for all my Canadians out there, like I start off every episode, make sure you're buying Canadian, make sure we are not participating in the US economy as much as possible. If you have trips and stuff that aren't like absolute essential work stuff, like cancel it. How was that, my friends? Yeah, so I'm just gonna do that little quick blurb. I can't comment on what is happening for the rest of the day in terms of what he's going to announce. You never really can tell. The Trump presidency feels like one giant long day of April fucking fools. Yeah. Okay, so thoughts and prayers to everyone out there. Yeah, let's do what we can to support our economy. This week I'm really excited about this film. I'm excited most weeks about the films because I picked them. So that is helpful for that. This week is Silver Linings Playbook. And for the longest time, actually, up until this year, this was my favorite film of all time. It was knocked out by two films this year, which was Anora and Nosferatu. It's now number 3 on my list, but it was number 1 for a really, really long time. So this is a 2012 film directed by David O. Russell. It is based on a 2008 novel of the same name. And it is about a family and their kind of journey through mental illness. And it particularly centers on the character of Pat Sultano. And he is the main protagonist of the film. Bradley Cooper plays Pat Sultano Jr. He, like I said, he's the main character of the film. Initially, when casting first started to take place, they actually wanted Vince Vaughn to be cast as Pat, which I just think is, such a weird casting. Initially, David Russell was slated to make this film before he made The Fighter, and then he went on to make The Fighter, so that casting sort of went through. And David Russell had planned to make a different film with Bradley Cooper, but because of the energy he was bringing in the conversations they had had when developing that film, which did not sort of come to fruition, that led him to being cast as Pat. We have Jennifer Lawrence as Tiffany Maxwell. She is Pat's friend and love interest. There was a lot of different people in the running for Tiffany, because initially Jennifer Lawrence, who was only 21 at the time of filming, to Bradley Cooper's 37, was thought to be too young. On my initial viewing of the film when it first came out, I was 16. Yes, 16. I didn't notice a big age difference, but in watching this movie more recently, it's very obvious that she is like 20 and he is 37. So initially, Anne Hathaway was cast as Tiffany Maxwell, but had to drop out due to her schedule with The Dark Knight Rises. Thank God. I am really on the Hathaway hater train. I don't like her. I like her in The Princess Diaries. That's it. I think she just does the same sort of thing. I don't know. She doesn't have a lot. I don't know. I don't like her. She didn't have a lot of range. She's god awful in The Dark Knight Rises. And I'm glad she stayed away from my favorite movie. Other people that were considered for the part were Elizabeth Banks, who I think would have been god awful, Kirsten Dunst, who I think has the emotional range of a teaspoon. Angelina Jolie was also in the running for this film. She would have been amazing. Her and Bradley Cooper are the same age, so that would have been better. Like, you just know, like, when seeing the film that, like, Angelina Jolie with her, like, dark feminine energy could just, like, nail it. Bringing, like, the warmth and the complexity to Tiffany, like, she would have, although I love Jennifer Lawrence in this role, I do see, like, a version of the film with Angelina Jolie where it would have gone on to be as successful as it was. And I do think it still would have brought home that Oscar. Angelina Jolie would have been incredible casting for that. Blake Lively was also considered, which I think is such an odd choice. She's such a bad actress. Rooney Mara, which I think would have been miscast. Rachel McAdams. I don't know. I like Rachel McAdams, but again, I just don't think she has that like range to her. I wouldn't buy her being like kind of dark. And Olivia Wilde, who again, she's so pretty. That's why she's famous. Like, she's not a good actress. She's never been in anything good. She's not a good director. I don't know. She's not my thing. But initially, David Russell did think that Jennifer Lawrence was too young, but in multiple screen tests, she sort of proved her acting ability, and he then cast her in the film. Robert De Niro plays Pat Sultano Sr. or Patrizio. So he's, the father of Bradley Cooper's character, Pat. We have Jackie Weaver, who plays Dolores Sultano, Pat's mother. We have Anupam Kaur as Cliff Patel. This is Pat's doctor and therapist. We have Chris Tucker as Danny McDaniels. He's a friend of Pat's. We have Julia Stiles as Veronica Maxwell, Tiffany's sister. She's excellent in this movie, and her role takes a lot of like subtlety to it. So it's not a very like in your face performance, but she brings a lot of depth, I think, to the film in a very quiet way. I really enjoy her performance in this. We have Shea Wingham as Jake Sultano, so that's Pat's brother. And we have John Ortiz as Ronnie, that's Veronica's husband, Pat's best friend, and Tiffany's brother-in-law. And we have Bria Bree as Nikki Sultano, Pat's ex-wife. So this film, this is pre-Me Too movement, pre-2017. So this film was produced by the Weinstein Company. It's an adaptation of Matthew Quick's novel. And David O. Russell was selected to direct it. They believed it was going to be a difficult film to create because it is this like kind of mix of like darkness, mental illness, but also like this romantic element to it. This film, to me, feels like a mental illness fairy tale. And that's like kind of that's how I feel like I can word it. I don't know. I have struggled with mental illness my whole life. I have bipolar disorder. This is the first time I ever saw bipolar disorder reflected on the screen in a way that wasn't like locking somebody in like quote unquote a lunatic asylum. This is the first time I ever saw somebody with bipolar disorder that was, a teacher and had been a husband and had a family. And yes, he'd had this psychiatric break and these real big problems. But his family was helping him. His family through the character like helps his character work back into building a functional life. And it's really real. It was just like, and then his meeting of Tiffany and their love story, and it very much is this like a mix of fairy tale and then the super real grounded story of not what we picture in the cinematic sense of mental illness, but what does real mental illness look like? What does it feel like to take your meds? What does it feel like to not react well to your meds? What does it feel like to know that your meds are working because you don't feel crazy, you don't have these impulses, you don't feel like you want to jump off a cliff. However, you don't feel anything at all. You feel flat, you feel dead, you feel numbed out. And, that internal struggle of like, well, I have all this stuff that now I can function through, but also like I don't have any sparkle in my eyes anymore. And like to hear somebody talk about that was like the first time I ever saw that reflected back onto me. And I think that's why this film is so important to me. Very much like the bonus episode that we did on Tuesday, or that dropped or today, will be dropping today, of Rain Man. There isn't, mental illness is just a thing in the film. We don't look down on mental illness. We're not meant to judge Pat. It's just like, this is part of Pat. Pat has bipolar disorder. This is a part of Tiffany. Tiffany has major depressive disorder. Here's some suspected mental illness from these other people, the characters in the film that they're not delving into within themselves. And I think that was really profound for me to see, especially because I think we forget how far we've come in the last 10 to 15 years with stuff. Like in 2012, when this movie dropped, mental illness it still does have a lot of stigma, but it had way more stigma. Way. Nobody talked about stuff in the way that they do now. Particularly, I'm sure they did more in urban parts of the country, not where I live in a small town. That was not talked about. People didn't have a great understanding about it. It's only now starting to, I say post-pandemic, really starting to be talked about more. I remember that this is, again, dating me, how old I am. I was working at my job at a video rental store And I recommended this movie, and a woman brought it back, and she was very upset with me, very upset with me. And she's like, "Why would you recommend a movie about crazy people?" She's like, "I never want to watch a movie with somebody who's like from a mental institution. These people need to be locked up." And I remember being like, whoa, like that was the reaction I got for like recommending a movie that was nominated for Best Picture, might I add you. Like it wasn't like out of left field. This movie got a ton of buzz. It was really popular. But yeah, like that was something that somebody in my town felt fully confident and said with their whole chest to my face that crazy people should be locked up. So there's a soundbite for you. But yeah, so this we've come a long way since 2012. So David O. Russell's son has bipolar disorder and OCD, so he was able to draw on his own experiences. He also has a little cameo in the film. David O. Russell himself, I think if we're gonna chat about him, has some stuff going on of his own. He is pretty well known for his extreme treatment of his actors on set. Him and George Clooney actually got into a fist fight on the set of Three Kings. Clooney accused Russell of being demanding of crew both verbally and physically. That he shoved and humiliated people. He's also received criticism from Lily Tomlin during the filming of I Heart Huckabees. Apparently, they got into many on-set arguments, and he called her sexist and unkind things. This was reported in a New York Times news article by Sharon Waxman, and she describes David Russell calling Lily Tomlin the crudest word imaginable in front of actors and crew, and he would continually storm back on and off set shouting, and this was actually corroborated by leaked videos. However, later Lily Tomlin came out and said that her and David O. Russell are fine. And when she was asked about it later, her quote is, "It happens sometimes, but David is a very mercurial person. That's part of why he's so brilliant. He almost reflects the movie. I did 2 movies with him. I Heart Huckabees was so crazy and all over the place. I think he embodies intuitively whatever he's trying to make happen. It was just crazy stuff. We were always doing something, and then we get manic and crazy, and I just flipped on him, and then he flipped on me. And stuff goes on. But it's nothing. It's like family. You have a big fight in your family, and it's usually treated that way on set. You don't want misbehavior. Believe me, it's embarrassing. It's humiliating, because you lose it. You look like a crazy person. But I adore David. I adore his talent. And a lot of my friends say, well, you won't work with him again. And I say, of course they will. I adore him. He's brilliant. And then we have another incident from 2013. This revolves Amy Adams. So he made her life on set during American Hustle Hell, and that at one point Christian Bale had to intervene. Amy Adams herself spoke about this in 2016 in GQ, and she said, he was hard on me, that's for sure. It was a lot. I was just really devastated on that set. And she expressed that Jennifer Lawrence doesn't take any of it. She's a Teflon. I'm not Teflon, but I also don't like to see other people being treated badly, and it's not okay with me. So that's sort of David O. Russell in a nutshell. I feel like it's important to talk about that he does produce these films that I have been huge fans of, particularly 3 of them. I love The Fighter, I love Silver Linings Playbook, and I love American Hustle. They all came out within a couple of years of each other. We haven't really seen that much from him recently, or at least I haven't seen of anything of his recently. I think post Me Too movement, a lot more conversations about having things be proper working conditions on set. I think directors like David O. Russell and like a Stanley Kubrick kind of, torment your actors to get the performance you want out of them is starting to fade, hopefully. But he's brilliant. His films are brilliant. So it's complicated. It's complicated to talk about. So I think that's also part of a discussion that needs to be had within mental illness, because I think we are not treating people like that if we are all okay in the membrane. So the score is done by Danny Elfman. I don't always talk about the score, but I love this one. Danny Elfman is quite prolific. He's also been involved with Good Will Hunting, Men in Black, Big Fish, and Milk. Also 2010's Alice in Wonderland. The main title of The Simpsons, the main title from Desperate Housewives, Nightmare Before Christmas. He's also was involved with Batman, Dick Tracy, Edward Scissorhands, Planet of the Apes, Spider-Man. So even if you think you don't know who Danny Elfman is, you know who Danny Elfman is. The music in this is phenomenal. Silver Linings Playbook premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival in September of 2012. The initial release was done instead of a wide release. They did like sort of a slow expansion of theaters as momentum started to grow for the film. I saw this in theaters 3 times when it first came out. I saw it once by myself because I'm a big fan of going to movies by myself. I dragged my mom the second time and she loved it. She loved it so much that we then went again together. So I saw it 3 times. My mom and I do that. If we like a film in theaters, we'll go see it a couple of times. So this film had a budget of $21 million and grossed $236.4 million worldwide at the box office. The critical response for this film was almost unanimously positive. It currently holds a 92% on Rotten Tomatoes. Both Bradley Cooper and Jennifer Lawrence received their flowers from critics for this film. The Hollywood Reporter said the chemistry between Cooper and Lawrence makes them a delight to watch, and that their performances anchor the ensemble cast, who also give great performances even in very small roles. Russell's direction was also praised. Roger Ebert, who is my favorite critic, or he was, gave it 3 out of 5 stars, saying that the film was so good it could almost be a terrific classic, and that Russell's screenplay is ingenious for a way that the major concerns for the father and the son pivot on the final beat. This film is incredible. It does have the way that the dialogue is back and forth. It has this very modern topic of mental illness, but it does feel like a classic movie. And like I said, there's this underlying feeling of fairy tale through the whole thing. And as a Disney gal, I picked up on it. There very much is this like modern day classic fairy tale mental illness. Like, it's very hard to describe, but it just works. It's awesome. This film received many, many accolades. I watched the Oscars heavily. I mean, I watch them every year, but I really wanted them to win the Academy Award. It was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor for Bradley Cooper, Best Actress for Jennifer Lawrence, Best Supporting Actor for Robert De Niro, Best Supporting Actress for Jackie Weaver, Best Adapted Screenplay for David O. Russell, and Best Film Editing. It ended up winning just one of those nominations, which was Best Actress for Jennifer Lawrence. And she was only 22 when she won that, which is crazy young. It really makes me feel like I need to be doing more with my life. I don't know if you guys ever feel that way, but whenever I read how young some of these people are, I'm like, oh, fuck, I really need to get my life together. Okay, let's get into the plot, guys. So the film opens up, it opens up at a mental health facility. Our main character, Pat Patricio Saldano Jr., is introduced. We see him going to his group therapy. We see him wait in line for his medication that he then spits out, and he is being released today from the hospital after 8 months. He had a psychiatric break and was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. It is revealed when his mother picks him up that his ex-wife, Nikki, has put a restraining order on him because what caused the psychiatric break, or, kind of came to a head at least, was when Pat came home to find that Nikki was having an affair, and he beat the ever-loving daylights out of that guy. His main focus in wanting to get out is wanting to reconcile with his wife, which of course, now that there's a restraining order, is just not something that is possible. So during his time at the hospital, he has befriended a man named Danny Daniels. This is played by Chris Tucker, who is so funny in this. It's unclear what Danny McDaniels has, other than he's very excited. He's very thankful. They both get into the car, and during the car ride, it's kind of revealed that Danny actually isn't supposed to leave today, that he's kind of escaped from this mental institution, and his mother tries to turn the car around to bring Danny back, and Pat grabs the steering wheel, which scares the shit out of his mom, Pat, and everybody, and Danny goes back to the hospital. And it's just this moment where we start to see that Pat's like impulse control is like not great. And of course we know, but his mother doesn't know, that Pat is not taking his medication. Pat is then also mandated to go to therapy. And he meets his therapist named Cliff Patel. And Cliff Patel is his doctor. He's very understanding, and he's very, very smart. And he's trying to kind of figure Pat out. There's this scene in his office on Pat's first visit, where he plays a song that is Pat's wedding song, and it triggers Pat's like anger. And so when Pat goes in to talk about it, they kind of go over the whole scene of what happened. So they go over the whole incident with Nikki, and that, Pat is working to trying to get her back by, hoping that like kind of people in his life pass information to Nikki about how well he's doing. And, Dr. Patel encourages him to take his medication and reminds him that if he does have any more violent outbursts, he is going to have to go back to the institution. Pat is saying like, no, I have this great outlook on life, and that he attempts to see like good things, and he tries to find the silver lining in everything. That's what's keeping him going. Pat, is still not wanting to take his medication. He's doing a lot of kind of alternative therapies, things like exercising and reading and stuff to try and get, which are all really good things if you struggle with your mental health to do, exercise, reading, creative outlets, things like that. But of course, like when you have bipolar disorder, you need to take your medication. You really do. It's like you can't wellness your way out of bipolar. So Pat is like ramping up, having these anxiety attacks. He decides that he's going to read Nikki's entire syllabus. Nikki's also a teacher, because that's what Pat was before his restraining order, and now he's going through all this legal process, obviously. And he stays up all night reading Ernest Hemingway just to get to the end, and he hates the way it ends, and he throws the book out the window, and he goes, "What the fuck?" And he bursts into his parents' room, and he's very clearly manic, and he's talking to them about the book, and he's like so angry. And this is a funny little scene. Like his parents are like, "For the love of God, like, why are you're 37 years old, like, why are you waking me up in the middle of the night to tell me that you don't like your ex-wife's like high school kids reading material?" Like, it's just so funny. And we then flip to a scene that is very hard to watch. That has a panic attack, and he ends up getting into it with his father. He's gone into a bit of a manic episode, and he's trying to find his wedding video, and he can't find it, and he's getting progressively more amped and more amped and more amped. And then him and his father end up getting into a physical altercation that in which the police are called, and his father hits him, and it is so hard to watch. Jackie Weaver, who plays the mother. Yes, Bradley Cooper and Robert De Niro are so great in this. Obviously, they have the bigger kind of role in this like whole fight, because they are physically fighting each other. But Jackie Weaver as the mother, watching this in horror, is the audience reflection, and what you're feeling is what you see on her face. She's amazing. This scene wouldn't have near the amount of impact it does without Jackie Weaver's performance in this. She's so good. So we have a few of these little scenes, and then after this, the police have been called and stuff, then Pat begins to take his medication regularly. Pat then goes to visit his friend Ronnie. Ronnie and his wife were couples friends of Pat and Nikki. Ronnie and Pat have still remained close. They're both big sports guys. That's a big thing in Pat's house, is the Eagles. This is supposed to take place in the 2008 football season. Sorry, I'm not a sports person. You can probably tell. Through the football season, the Eagles, they're from Philadelphia. Their father does a lot of betting and makes his money that way. There's a lot of very clear OCD, mental illness going on with his father that is just not being acknowledged, because God forbid a boomer acknowledge their mental health. The families as a household kind of ride or dies on whether or not the Eagles play well. And Ronnie, although not as extreme, obviously big football guy, so they really bond over this. Pat ends up wearing a football jersey to dinner, which is, he actually runs by his therapist whether or not that's fine. And his therapist is a big football fan, so he's like, of course it's fine. Anyway, so they go to dinner, and Tiffany, who is Veronica's sister, is there. Her name is Tiffany. Tiffany used to be married to Tommy. Pat kind of discovers in the moment that Tommy has died, and Tiffany is clearly not doing well. They're, Veronica and Ronnie want to have this like lovely dinner party. They have this amazing, immaculate home where everything looks perfect. You can very much tell that Veronica wants everything to be perfect. And Tiffany is the opposite of that. She doesn't care. She's got an extremely flat affect. There's like a underlying pulse of rage. She doesn't care about the show. And her sister's very opposite. And you can see the anxiety within Veronica, or played by Julia Stiles, as Tiffany's like interacting, this like underlying level of both fatigue from Tiffany's antics over time and embarrassment, which I think is a tough role to play. And Julia Stiles does it really well in a very subtle way. And this is like I said, and like the critics said too, like this is where the film really shines. It's like seeing how these other characters interact to Tiffany and Pat. So they're trying to have this lovely dinner party. Pat realizes that Tommy's dead and he has questions and he's not going to hold him in for a better moment. So he's asking her questions. She asks him about the psychiatric hospital. They end up having this funny conversation about mental illness and the different medications and the effects that they have on them, which is cute. And I think if you've ever been through, like if you've ever taken like antipsychotics or antidepressants, or you've ever been on medication or, been hospitalized or anything like that, this is hilarious. This is a hilarious human thing that, although they mispronounced some of the medications, they could have run that by one nurse. That would have been great. The effects that they're describing are very accurate, and it's funny, and it's like this weird like flirting for like the mentally ill, which like I love as a member of the mentally ill. I just thought was really heartwarming and sweet. So they really kind of connect. So Pat walks Tiffany home and she tries to take him inside with her and to have casual sex, and he basically says like no, like I'm married. He points to her his ring, and she says, well, so am I. And Pat says, well, no, like your husband's dead. And she slaps Pat in the face and walks inside. Pat and Tiffany end up bumping into each other quite a bit on Pat's running route. Pat runs past Tiffany's house, and Tiffany kind of continually sort of surprises him back and forth. And they sort of develop this sort of like unlikely friendship. And Pat really wants to get Nikki back. And because Veronica is friends with Nikki, Tiffany agrees to help Pat if he helps her. There's this great moment in the film where initially Tiffany agrees to help Pat with no kind of favor back. And then she says like, no, like I need you to do something for me. Like I keep, giving all these things of myself and then I'm left empty. It's just brilliant. Jennifer Lawrence is just brilliant in this film. So what Tiffany wants Pat to do is to be her partner in this upcoming dance competition. One of the ways that Tiffany works through her own mental illness is through dance. That's sort of her recovery and her therapy. And she wants to go to this big dance competition. Tiffany is very much an amateur dancer, but she does need a partner. And so Pat agrees in exchange for her delivering the letter. So then there are many scenes of Pat and Tiffany dancing together, and his mother is very clearly happy that he's enjoying dance and that he has something positive. She really likes Tiffany. She thinks Tiffany is a good influence on him. There's a moment where Danny McDaniels is out of the hospital and he comes and he meets Tiffany and he's flirting with her, and you can see that Pat's like a little bit jealous. There's a scene where Tiffany's changing and Pat kind of catches himself kind of looking at her. She's like in the other room, but he catches her like in a mirror glimpse, and he leaves the house because he's starting to kind of develop these feelings for Tiffany. Like we can tell, but we don't think Pat can really tell yet. So there's a number of practice scenes. We also have a really awesome featuring of Girl from the North Country by Johnny Cash and Bob Dylan. I love that song. It's just beautiful. It's in the dance sequence. We also flip to some more scenes where Pat's father, who is, doing illegal bookmaking and placing a lot of bets on the Eagles, he believes that Pat's attendance for games has an effect on whether or not the Eagles win. And that when Pat misses out on games or isn't there or is with Tiffany that the Eagles are losing. Pat tries to, tell his father, like, no, this is OCD, this is superstitious. And his father kind of begs him. They're going to go actually out to an Eagles games. Pat's father is not allowed at the stadium because he's beat up too many people. So he says, oh, you have to go to this game. It's really important that you be there. So Pat has to ask Tiffany for the time off from practice to attend the game. She hates sports, hates football, and is not thrilled at all. At this moment, she also gives a typed reply from Nikki that somewhat hints that they might reconcile. Pat then goes to the football game and bumps into his doctor, Dr. Patel, and there are some Eagles fans who are being very racist to Dr. Patel. And Pat and his brother get into a physical fight and are arrested. And then the Eagles lose. Their father is furious. He blames the Eagles' loss on Tiffany for God knows what reason and her involvement in his life. Tiffany, pushes back on this a lot, and she ends up rattling off a bunch of statistics about all the times that the Eagles have won when her and Pat have been together. And this seems to sort of calm down Patricio Senior. And then he decides that he's going to make a big bet on the next game. And he decides to make a parlay bet involving Tiffany and Pat as well. So he bets that the Eagles will win against the Dallas Cowboys and Tiffany and Pat will score a 5 out of 10 in their dance competition. If he wins, he will win double the money back that he lost on the last bet. Pat, is really like, don't do this. Like, we're terrible. Like, please don't do this. And Pat doesn't want to do it at all. He doesn't want to be involved. He doesn't want to be, have this responsibility of his father hanging over him. But, they sort of talk him into it by saying, Nikki's going to be there because she does plan on being there. Pat rereads the letter again, and he notices the phrase, if it's me reading the signs, and this is something that's frequently used by Tiffany. And this is where Pat realizes that Tiffany has lied to him and she wrote the response letter. And then we flip to the dance competition. Tiffany, Pat, and then Ronnie and Veronica and Pat's family all arrive at the dance competition the night of the football game. Tiffany is devastated to see that Veronica actually did invite Nikki, and Nikki is there because at this point, Tiffany's now fallen for Pat. Tiffany then runs away to the bar and she starts drinking and she starts flirting with some guy. Pat finds Tiffany right before their turn, drags them on stage, and they begin their routine. There's multiple kind of dance styles within this one dance number, and it starts to reflect like the bipolar nature of Bradley Cooper's character. We have like waltz type music, and then like there's intercut with like the white stripes, which is really fun. It's not a great dance, but they do look like they're having a good time. And then everybody else in this dance competition is like hardcore professionals. And so their chances of getting a 5 are pretty small. And as they, finish their number, which they somewhat fucked up on, they learn that the Eagles have beaten the Cowboys. And after their awarding the score for the dance numbers, Tiffany and Pat managed to get an average score of 5. Pat Senior and everybody like celebrate, like screaming, and everybody in the crowd is confused, like, why are they freaking out about a 5? Pat then goes over to talk to Nikki, and we can't hear what Pat's actually saying. Tiffany runs off crying. She runs down the stairs. It's very dramatic, very Cinderella. She loses her shoe for a minute even. Pat catches up with Tiffany, hands her a letter, and he admits that he knows that she forged it and that he loves her. And says, I've loved you since the moment I met you. I'm sorry it took me a while to realize it. And they kiss, and then the movie kind of ends. Pat Sr. opens a restaurant with the money he won, and Pat and Tiffany begin their relationship. It really is something that you need to actually watch because a lot of it is like quiet moments through dialogue. Unless I were to read the script out to you, it would be here forever in a day. There aren't as many like big beat plot point moments in terms of like action sequences in which I can describe. So I highly recommend watching this movie. Bradley Cooper is amazing. I think he does such a nuanced performance. I love it. Jennifer Lawrence, although I do agree she's too young, did a great great job in this film. De Niro, great as always. Jackie Weaver, like I said, often reflects what the audience is supposed to be thinking. She's amazing, very understated, and she definitely deserved that Academy Award. I was rooting for you, Jackie. And Chris Tucker is great. Julia Stiles, everybody's good in this film. This movie's great. 10 out of 10, recommend. Hopefully you're not like that lady at My Small Town who thinks all mental patients should be locked away forever. That's how far we've come since then, guys. I hope everybody has a really happy Thursday, and enjoy the rest of the week.